interested in neuroscience, quantum physics, mysticism, and contemplation, then you need to understand the difference between power versus force in terms of your personal energy. So let's remember that your energy changes your personal reality. So that energy can create good or bad, for sure. We know that negative energy creates negative things. But if that's a fact, positive energy really, really does create positive things. And I'm talking about healing and transformation, recovery from depression, lack of confidence and purpose, lack of power. And this is a big subject, power versus force. Energy can be measured and mapped out from our most primal, deeply rooted instincts through to how you think, feel, and act today. So think about your emotional state over the last 30, 60, 90 days. Have you been battling to keep your head above water, or are you effortlessly in the flow of things? So force is inherently destructive. Look at history. It takes or drains from its environment. It requires constant, exhausting struggle rooted in fear and survival. But power means action. Power is creative, it flows, and it gives energy back to the world. Energy that's sustainable, energy that is based on connection and love. But many of us are trapped into force and we don't even know it. We're not even aware that when we're trying to force, there's no flow. There's no focus. Where focus goes, energy flows. And force stops the flow of energy. Let's remember what Albert Einstein said, that everything is energy and that's all there is to it. Everything is energy. E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass. In other words, the seen and the unseen are the same. The energy you can see and can't see, but we'll get into that a bit later. But he said if you match the frequency of the reality you want, you cannot help but create that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy. This is physics, science, and today it's neuroscience. So it's something that you can use to focus your life. It's something you can use personally and tangibly to create the transformations that you want. Everything in existence, including our personalities, is energy and mass with a specific weight or vibrational frequency. Now, you've always heard people talking about vibrational frequency. You know, if you can get to a level of gratitude where that frequency is changing your life, you become positive, you become thankful, happy for who you are, how things are, and the very meaning of your life comes into vibrational frequency. It comes into flow. So our energetic state directly influences our reality. Make no mistake, your depression, your anxiety, or your success and your peace. So higher energy levels, of course, correlate with positive emotions and spiritual practices. These things obviously lead to fulfilling experiences. 1+1 is something that we all know, while lower energy, depressive states, stagnation, feeling stuck from trying to force results in negative and definitely limiting beliefs, where the former is a state of becoming unlimited, which is what we teach in the paradigm process. So the realm of force is around 100 to 400 joules. We've got a scale, the energetic scale of consciousness, ESC. It's very, very useful. It goes from 0 to 1,000, and then you can map yourself out on that scale of 0 to 1,000. You can be vibrating at 400, 600, 800. And it's not ridiculous stuff. It's actually mapping out your personality quite easily and quite simply. If you're uh, vibrating at a very low scale, you're depressed, you have fear, anger, shame, despair, you're going to be on a scale of 1,000, you're going to be around 300. And that's your fight, flight, and freeze. So I would definitely check out the energetic scale of consciousness, or ESC. You can just look it up. Um, so just to explain that a bit more, we start with force. That's how we develop our personalities. Every thought, feeling, action, and mood that we have becomes a personality trait, and those traits over time become the personality that we can misidentify with. We can have a frightened personality, a depressive personality, anxious personality, avoidant personality. But the good news, and I won't get into this now, the good news is your personality, persona, meaning mask, is not you. So the fear, shame, anger, and despair, the poor decision making, is not you. It's something that you've created to survive. So as life goes on, we grow and we develop and individuate, as Carl Jung would say, and we begin moving out of survival mind states. And if you're listening to this, you're wanting to grow and transform. There's no doubt about it. So look how we're using our energy to make that happen for ourselves and then others and then the world. So, we go from a survival zone to a reactive zone where we get easily triggered by parents and family and teachers and other people. And that keeps happening when we believe the world is an unsafe place, a violent, malevolent place, because that's what we're experiencing internally. Because we don't know consciously what's around the next corner, we've got to be reactive. We've got to function in survival. But that's uh, until we can bear things like faith, the mystical, the unknown. And then we don't need those reactive and survival experiences anymore. So simply put, the paradigm shift occurs sort of around midway of the scale of 0 to 1,000, where we reach a tipping point and change and growth begin to happen, which is something that we all need to know is our life purpose, to become more conscious and not of our thoughts that bind us and limit us, but not of those limiting beliefs, in other words, which I call the subconscious. No, it's to realize that there's a tipping point, a paradigm shift, a spiritual awakening, whatever you're going to call it, that leads you from the five sensory world that you once thought was all there was to the spiritual or the extrasensory or the energetic world, which we call I7X. You can look that up too. That is imagination, intention, where you can actually create the life you want and make the subconscious conscious and make the negative and fearful positive and loving. So we become empowered when we cross that tipping point or have that spiritual awakening or paradigm shift, and we become empowered. And then we go around 800 joules and we become transcendent, which just means you can transcend the physical. You can transcend matter. It's what Einstein said all along. It's not something you should get lost in. It's not something that people can say is ridiculous. It's science. And our whole program is called the science of finding your spiritual self. It really is easy and simple, almost too simple to teach sometimes, that we have the ability to direct our energy and scale a life that we want out of it. Once we have a roadmap for transformation, we focus our energy in what fires together, wires together, and we become active creators of our reality. That's you. You can be empowered to shape your life through the energy you already have inside. And when you obviously match that energy with what's outside, the law of attraction, yin and yang, etc., 1+1, I call it, the world becomes a good place. You're connected. That's what spirituality is all about. So back to power versus force. Force being very low on that scale. Force is trying to use a ton of energy with no focus to try and get what you want. So remember that force, whenever you force, it's going to be destructive. We've got a saying, if you overthink anything, it becomes negative. That's a scientific fact. So force is destructive. It drains energy from yourself and other people. It requires constant effort and struggle. And it's just based on principles of scarcity, not gratitude. That's opposite. Think about it. Scarcity, fear, separation. It's destructive to self and others. And it's all about manipulation, victimhood, rage, anger. And if you look at history, look at wars and things like that, it's all about force, rage. It never works. It always ends in peace. History is my proof of that. So, when we go and look back at a war, we think, why the hell did it even start? So we're at war with ourselves when we're depressed, anxious, and stressed. When we're confused, we're at war with ourselves. So we've got to get that war out. All war belongs where? Not in your head, on paper. Not in your body, on paper. So that brings us to power from, above 200 to 400 joules. It's all about creative rather than destructive energy. So once we develop power, which means the ability to action what you actually want in life, not to just think about it, to actually verb, to do what you want in life. In other words, if you're doing the same things over and over again, getting terrible results, you're forcing things. You're not operating in the realm of power. So power is contributive. It gives energy. It flows naturally and effortlessly. In other words, it's coherent. Power is definitely based on, well, I'd say love, abundance, connection. It's life affirming, of course. Power. Think of the greatest power, obviously, which is God. It's a creative and life affirming and loving force. We're the destructive ones. So wisdom and courage are all about our ability to create. And that's the difference between power versus force. So back to basics. Everything is energy. Your brain is processing millions of signals every few seconds. So our brains focus like filters and funnels, processing these millions of signals, but they focus only on what we deem to be important. In other words, what we deem to have meaning. Very, very important in this conversation. So, by consciously directing our attention, we can retrain our brains, rewire our realities to notice energy patterns we previously filtered out. If you're thinking of yourself as not good enough and a bad person, well, you're just not going to be in gratitude, one of the most powerful energies on planet Earth. That's not self-love, even more powerful love, obviously being the most powerful, fear being the least powerful energy on Earth, yet taking up so much of our focus. Think about that paradox. So, we can draw on parallels between quantum physics, where particles exist in states of potential until observed. And that's the same in our own lives. The subconscious, until observed, doesn't become conscious. So there's no focus. So the observer effect teaches us that by paying attention as we were always taught to do as kids. By paying attention, we change our reality by focusing and becoming active participants rather than passive observers. In other words, we become powerful instead of powerless. So energy flows, it doesn't change, of course, but it flows from place to place. You can accumulate energy or you can dispense of it, which a lot of people unwisely do and wonder why they are deeply pressed down. They feel deeply pressed down. So what we've got to understand is as energy is measurable, your focus is measurable. Think about ADHD, which is all about not being able to focus, an epidemic at the moment. So your focus is measurable, quantifiable, and it's directing you. And we're always heading towards fear or love, survival or creation. Same thing. Survival mind, you can't create answers that you're unaware of. So in the survival mind, your life is about fight, flight, and freeze. That fight will be in your relationships, in your career. The freeze will be in your funds and finances. And, the flee, we're avoidant. We don't try and get out of or say, hey, I'm going to create a different person here. I'm going to rewire my reality. We don't have the power or the energy to do it until we become aware and make that paradigm shift. So lower energy is always going to be draining your emotions, and you're always going to be able to tell because you'll be experiencing some kind of fear, anger, or stress. So your frightened personality is going to be triggered all the time by people, by, what people say. For some people, not getting a job is something they want to end their life over, while others will say opportunities exist elsewhere. One is creative and one is based in survival. So when we focus, when we align our thoughts, when we become clear, the brain with its elevated energy in thoughts, feelings, actions, and behaviors creates physical synchrony. It's something you can experience in your nervous system, in your body. Survival states are seriously felt in your sympathetic nervous system, and they lock you into this 3D reality of the senses. I call it a 5 sensory existence. We're not monkeys. We're not lizards. Monkey mind, lizard brain. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And when we misidentify with the personality as who we are, we're locked into that 3D reality, and we're going to suffer because we're here to transcend, biblically. One of my favorite sayings is, do not be conformed to this world, which is your 5 sensory world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Isn't that amazing? And that was written almost exactly 2,000 years ago. Romans 12:12. It would do you good to look it up or pen it up. Do not conform to the pattern of this world. Can you see? That's energy. The pattern of energy, non-coherent. Do not conform to the pattern of this world. Be transformed. Transform means to go above form, to go above your sensory world, sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste. Be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good and pleasing, perfect will. In other words, you'll be able to see what's meaningful. You'll be able to see where you're going, and it'll be good. So there we go. 5 sensory thinking only gets us a certain way down the road. There's only so many joules of energy in a 5 sensory world. So the energy drain is why we get anxious or depressed. Think about anxiety as energy. It's buzzing, it's not coherent, it's confused, there's no harmony. And it's all based in lower frequencies. In other words, we're having anxiety attacks without the body, heart, mind's permission. And fear is always about repetition, doing the same things over and over again that get us nowhere until we force. So your body can become chemically addicted to familiar stress hormones, to that cortisol, to that anger. It can become physically addicted in mass, um, causing us to recreate the same predictable life, the same frustrations with not being able to get anywhere, like the Greek story of Sisyphus, who is pushing a rock up a hill. And when he gets the rock up to the top, because of his punishment, he's got to just keep doing it again and again, rolling that big rock up the hill, only to have to do it again and again. So we can imagine what toll that takes, how much energy that takes, and how much toll that would take on the body. It's the same thing that happens with our bodies, our hearts, and our minds. But then comes along the energy of love, and love is our natural state. Love includes creativity, kindness, gratitude, reverence for life, empathy for other people. You'll get people in Japan who don't stand on an insect. I've become more like that. I don't want to kill anything. I want to give it freedom to live because I have reverence for life now. So that energy of love is in everything I do. Love is a verb as well. It's an elevated emotion that gets us to actually do things differently. So it's a super high frequency, the highest of all, that generates internal coherence or peace beyond all understanding in the body. And if there's such a thing as cause and effect, 1+1, if this, then that, if there's cause and effect in the universe, which of course we know there is, instead of waiting for external events or energy or things to change your energy, why don't we generate those feelings or generate or focus that energy in towards new expressions of creating something good for ourselves? So love actually moves us beyond the body. To experience pure love, you actually have to disconnect, through meditation or contemplation. You have to disconnect your attention from the physical environment, the 3D, five sensory environment. You disconnect from people, objects, and time to experience and feel love. And in this way, you tune into the invisible energy, the immaterial field, the contemplative field of oneness and wholeness. So without getting too weird, when you intentionally practice feeling love, it signals the body, and now not the sympathetic nervous system, but the autonomic nervous system, into coherence, into peace, and it literally changes your biology. We know that positive energy can heal the body. The science is out. Meditation does it. Um, you know, when we release the past, our old relationships, memories can trigger us into survival, into low energy states. But if we disconnect from the past or the future and get into the present, for example, we can then experience the highest energy, most powerful energy of all, which is love, kindness, appreciation, and joy on purpose. And that is power, true power. Power when you are able to experience the emotions, the thoughts, the feelings, the states of consciousness that are the most beautiful available to us in the universe. When you can experience those things, you don't need the car, you don't need the money, You don't need the future to be different, or the past for that matter. I just love this quote by David Hawkins, who wrote the book Power versus Force, which is pretty good, and said, although the intellect is easily fooled, the heart recognizes the truth. Where the intellect is limited, the heart is unlimited. Where the intellect is intrigued by the temporary, the heart is only concerned with the permanent. So although the intellect, the IQ, is easily fooled, EQ recognizes the truth. Of course, what sets you free is the truth. Where intellect is limited, so the intellect is based in your five sensory world, your 3D five sensory world. The heart, which we can't see, that's the force of love. It's intrigued by and concerned with, reality. So in our program, we teach people. It's, again, almost too simple to teach. People who come in with 20-year addictions, with a 30-year major depressive disorder, 10 years of anxiety, of being consumed by panic attacks and fear and neuroticism. They come in, and literally that truth that Hawkins spoke about there sets them free. And they're not fooled anymore by the intellect. Now remember, the intellect is unfortunately always trying to force. Why? Because it's based in survival and it's always looking for answers that it can never find. So fear is frustrated. It's angry. And that part of you is so limited that, it feels like you're powerless. But don't be fooled. That's what spiritual awakening is all about. That's what a paradigm shift is about, is realizing you're a spiritual being having a human experience, not a human being looking for a spiritual experience. So that paradigm process, we've got 10 pathways. Pathway 1 is letting go of control, which is force, and recovering a sense of self-love. The second pathway is just as profound. It's letting go of the perfectionist, the way we think we should be, the world should be, and recovering a sense of gratitude. So when you are vibrating at the level of gratitude, you've hit somewhere where you're going to attract things to you. You're no longer in lack. If you're in gratitude, think about it. There's no more lack. So if you can experience gratitude, not with the IQ, not with your intellect, not in your thoughts, but if you can experience it in your heart, you will trigger love, the highest energy of all, and start setting yourself free. And then, the other 10 pathways, we let go of the neurotic side, the codependent mask, the eccentric, the victim actor, the people pleaser in us. Very importantly, the judge. And we recover a sense of wisdom, presence, resilience, certainty, connection, and so on. So that is who we really are, is not someone who has to justify. Like force always has to justify everything, whereas power requires no justification. Force is always moving against things, where power flows with things, flow not force. Force is characterized by arrogance. Power is characterized by humility. Now, who would have thought that? The meek shall inherit the earth, the meek or the egoless, or people who don't force. So power gives life and energy while force takes them away. And that's what we need to learn about this subject. Recognize, be aware when you're forcing, and stop. That's the power of contemplation, is re-looking, re-feeling, rethinking everything for a second time. I call it the power of your second thought. your first thoughts or that IQ is pretty useless. It's 5 sensory. It's very, very limited. Whereas if you can stop, feel, and then act, that changes the game. That allows you to transform and transcend low energy to high. All right, so here we go. In conclusion, this shift from power to force is a big deal that can really, really reshape your life. So think about this. To shift from the draining, exhaustive force to that radiance of power, we must first learn the sacred art of stopping, getting in the gap or pausing. For too long, we often live in this material world and we forget who we really are. We don't have to force. All we really need to do is let go. Let go, surrender. I call this enlightenment at gunpoint. The whole of the East, Japan, China, the beautiful traditions, they don't slay the dragon, they tame the dragon. And that's what they mean by letting go of clinging, letting go of the past, letting go of the future. Stop forcing, just let it flow. And this is going to change your life. I always call DTNMS a way to pause, stop and think before you do things, and think DTNMS, does this nourish my soul? That gets us into a 3-second gap between trigger and reaction, between power and force, fear and love. So stop, let go. That white-knuckled grip that we have is a sign that we're forcing. And we're acting from a state of 5-sensory, frightened personality. So just become aware and stop. Get into the gap, and you will find your sacred self right there. And when you do, you will recover as the paradigm process unfolds a sense of certainty, resilience, and presence like you've never felt before. And that's the end of anxiety and depression, the end of fear as the truth, which means reality, by the way, sets us free from force and fear. So I'll leave you with this. Rumi said that your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers you have within yourself that you have built against it. And he said, let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray. And this is Rumi, who was around in the 13th century. You can't make this stuff up. He got it from his extrasensory perceptions. He didn't live in that 5-sensory world. There's a cradle in your heart, he said, ready to be kindled. There is a void in your soul ready to be filled. You feel it, don't you? Can you see how that energy is extrasensory? You feel it, don't you? Reason is powerless in the expression of love. So let love have you.